Look, I'm a Slytherin. I'm not predisposed to be kind. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. So, I went into this not expecting much, and what I got was still somehow disappointing. Isn't it funny how a movie that you do not think will be good still manages to let you down? And no, that's not an indicator that it's actually worse than what I thought it was going to be, but rather that I saw the potential of how it could have worked and they still missed it. There is a good movie in here. Actually, I think more accurately, there's at least 2 good movies in here, if not 3, which is kind of at the heart of what really doesn't work about this film. There are things that are good or could have been good, given the breathing room and the pacing they needed, but there are too many plots, too many elements, too many characters, too many storylines piling up on top of each other until they all just sort of meld together and they just the whole thing suffocates under the weight of all of this. There is just too much, and especially considering that there's stuff that happens towards the end that is clearly meant to have emotional resonance, and in a properly paced film that had focused on the characters more thoroughly that this resonance is supposed to be coming from, probably would have. But here it doesn't, because what needed to be done, the work that needed to be done, the time that needed to be spent in order for those moments to have the emotional resonance the movie wants them to have, all that gets muscled aside in order to fit in the 4, 5, 6, I don't even know how many other friggin' plots there are. And when I say there's too much going on here, that doesn't mean I think it's confusing. I could follow it fine. I just couldn't connect with any of it because it didn't stick with it long enough. Plus, there's also plot holes out the friggin' butt on this thing. I would bet money that there is at least half an hour of cut material out of this, if not 45 minutes. And I can exemplify this with one character. Technically, this could count as a spoiler, but I seriously don't think it does. And when I explain this, you'll understand why. There is a character whose name I don't even remember. He's a follower of Grindelwald. He has 2 scenes in the movie. One scene where he is giving some information to Grindelwald and seems to be kind of wavering. We're not entirely sure if it's because he's afraid of Grindelwald, if he's questioning their purpose and their goals. We don't really know, but he seems a little bit iffy. And then later, at the end of the movie, he gets killed by Grindelwald. Who was this guy? Why was he unnerved? Why did Grindelwald feel the need to kill him? No idea. Like, there's no reason for him to be here at all. In any way, shape, or form. He serves 0 actual function. He provides a little bit of information to Grindelwald, but seriously, I will bet you he had an entire subplot that was cut. And the reason that he's here at all is because he happened to be the one giving this information that they still had to show Grindelwald getting. And then they were like, well, I guess we keep the end of his story too. But like, you don't give a character 2 scenes and expect that to have any meaning whatsoever, especially when they are at the extreme far ends of the runtime. But that's kind of what I'm getting at here. Now, before I start to really drill into any specific stuff, because that is going to constitute what could more genuinely be considered to be spoilers, let me talk about what does work. Now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about a little bit later is stuff that would have worked, but didn't, as presented. But there are a few things that do actually work. Honestly, the performances are all good. There was not a bad performance in the film. And I also kind of want to revise what I said about Newt Scamander as a character when I did my review of the first Fantastic Beasts. My opinion of that film overall has not changed, but I was rougher on Newt than I should have been. I've come to a better appreciation and understanding of what is being done with him as a hero and as a type of hero, and he's actually grown on me, so I quite like him. And that's not me going like he's better in this one. No, he's pretty much exactly the same. I just appreciate what they do with him more now than I did back when I saw the first Fantastic Beasts and when I did my review of that film. The characters who were good before are still good. That means Jacob and Queenie are highlights. A lot of the new characters are quite good. Lita Lestrange is surprisingly good. Newt's brother, pretty dang good. So that, no one is giving a bad performance. There's a couple of bland or unremarkable performances. Again, I do have to wonder how much of that is chalked up to, I bet you that there were 2 or 3 extra scenes these characters had that just hit the cutting room floor. But there's one thing that Jude Law is good as a young Dumbledore. He's solid. Actually, we get a number of other characters who we either know or have had referenced in the main series, and those were actually kind of cool. Most of those were pretty well integrated, except for one, which was stupid and pointless. But I'll come back to that one. So the thing that I actually think was the strongest element, it was the one thing that I think got as much screen time as it needed in order to work. And I was shocked that I feel this worked as well as it did, because this was something that I was really super expecting to hate. That's Grindelwald himself. He actually works really, really well as a villain. I really like the approach they're taking with him, and Johnny Depp's performance is, well, it's a Johnny Depp performance. You get what it says on the box. And I would complain about that, except when I actually stop and think about the adult actors in the Harry Potter franchise. The vast majority of them are basically just cast to be them, not be themselves, but to give what is the standard performance you tend to think of when you think of that actor. So I can't really begrudge Johnny Depp that when I was prepared to give a pass to all the other actors who were in the main series. So moving on from him specifically, in terms of the approach that is done with Grindelwald, what I really like and what I think does a lot to distinguish him from Voldemort, because I was certain he was just going to be a Voldemort knockoff, even though, yes, I know chronologically he comes first, but that doesn't matter. Order of release matters. So what I like is that there is a surprising amount of effort and time put into making it clear the way in which he gathers a following, the way that he appeals to people, who he targets, and how he goes about figuring out what are the things about them that I can appeal to that will get them over to my way of thinking. It's actually really well done. It's really well done on a one-on-one character basis. He has got kind of a speech rally kind of thing towards the end of the movie. That's quite well done. I don't think they crossed the line into actually making him appealing as a character, which is sort of something like the American History X problem, where you're showing someone despicable, but by showing the charisma of that person, you actually make this despicable thing appealing. I don't actually think it crosses that line, but it does present it in a way that you're like, okay, I get why some people actually would follow this guy. And the reason I say that's a really good distinction from Voldemort is one of the odd things about Voldemort, if you go back and look at the original Harry Potter series, is that I was going to say it's not clear. I mean, you kind of know, but it's hard to believe that people are following him because they like him and they believe in him. I get the sense that his followers, some of them believe in what they think he will make happen, but all the followers around him either appear to be just atrocious human beings who like Voldemort because serving him gives them a chance to be atrocious, or they are terrified of him. Nobody who isn't, insane, like Bellatrix Lestrange, they don't seem happy about following him. And that's not, to be clear, that's not actually a plot hole in the original Harry Potter series, because most of his followers he would have accumulated actually way before that series is set, back during his initial uprising, and we don't see any of that. So it's not actually a plot hole. I just don't really know how he accumulated those people, and seeing how he is around them in the points that we do see him in the series is like, oh boy, he wouldn't be a great boss. What is cool about Grindelwald is you do see that. You do see how he can gather and appeal to these people, and it makes him a distinctly different beast from just being super powerful and monstrous, which is what Voldemort is. Which is not to say that Grindelwald is not monstrous. He is, but they sort of add that little bit of honey to it, where you get why people who might not automatically be inclined to just be totally on board with his ideas might fall under his spell, for lack of a better term. So yeah, I think that's the single best handled element in the film overall. But from here, I'm gonna get on the complaint train, I think, pretty soon. Before I get there, you know what? Visually, it's still pretty good. There is a little bit more color in it, mostly when we're in sort of Newt's menagerie sort of settings. But the visual inventiveness of the world is still present. That's nice. I don't love the way some of it is shot. Like, the thing opens with an action scene that, you know, I know you think it's more dramatic to put an action scene in the middle of a thunderstorm, but you can barely see a friggin' thing that's going on. And so there are things like that, but overall it looks good. The creatures are cool, both conceptually and visually. So I was down for all that. The Nifflers are back, and those are adorable. I went with Liz. She wasn't up for joining me for this review, but she did squee at the like, not just like ooh, like legitimately several times at the Nifflers. So, you know, they're back, they're cute. There are some new creatures, which are kind of cool. And there's some flashback stuff that is just sort of, it's nice and nostalgic, because there's some flashback stuff set at Hogwarts, which kind of makes you go, oh, yeah, cool. So, yeah, there's all that. Now I'm going to start getting complainy. So, I feel like the movie, like I said that there was more than one movie taking place here. And the movie that I want to see, I'm probably going to start getting into spoilers at this point. So overall, like, if you're super invested in Harry Potter and the Wizarding World, go ahead, check it out, make your own opinion. But this is not going to convert anybody, not a chance in heck. So, and you know, I'm not going to promise you a good time, even if you are super into Harry Potter, which I am. So, the storyline that I found myself the most intrigued by, and also felt super hacked to the bone, was actually that of Credence, Ezra Miller's character. Who, first of all, thank God they got rid of that horrendously stupid haircut they had him in last time. But I was actually really interested in his story, because he had, in many ways, almost like an Anakin Skywalker's turn to the dark side kind of story going on, but it was such a minor footnote in everything else that was happening. So, like, in the early part of the film, we just find out that, oh yeah, no, he didn't die at the end. Okay, and now all of a sudden, well, he's in Paris. Okay, and he's working at a wizard circus and kind of in a freak show thing. Okay, and he's made friends with this woman who it turns out is Nagini. Yeah, Voldemort's snake. But she's a woman right now, and it's, yeah, like, that's a lot to skip over. That's a lot to go from, you know, to basically just skip how he survived, how he crossed the Atlantic, because he didn't have the means or the funds, and he doesn't really know how to use what powers he does have yet. How did he end up in this place? How did he make this connection with this woman? And here's the thing, I'm not asking these questions going, and I don't care about the answers. I actually kind of do. I think it would have been quite fascinating to get into the head of this character, because he's going through so much questioning. He doesn't really know who he is, and barely understands what he is. He doesn't know his own history. The reason he's in Paris is to try and figure out who he is, because he has no idea. And you get, Ezra Miller does a good job, and you get a pretty strong sense of the conflict going on in him, and the confusion, and the just trying to reach out and find anything to latch onto. And honestly, if you had made a movie that focused primarily on that, and maybe Lita Lestrange's story because they are thematically similar and they kind of come to a head. Those two stories cross paths at the end of the movie in a way that is very super clunky, because the way it gets expositioned is a character explains it and then another character basically revises that explanation, and then we get an extra twist at the very end, which meant nothing to me because by then I was just numb to this. There's some seriously bad exposition dumps in this movie, which again are things that should have been shown if they were going to be there. And I suspect they were done in the form of exposition because it got stuff done faster in order to fit all of the various things going on into it. Oh, you know what? It's worth touching on Dumbledore and Grindelwald specifically, because this was an element that I have complained about in more than one video, given, you know, the fact that J.K. Rowling and David Yates, the director, had said that they were not going to address what Rowling has been claiming for the last decade or so, that Dumbledore is a gay man and was in love with Grindelwald. Now, what we get in here actually does support that. It doesn't make it explicit, but what we have here I actually don't have any complaints about, and I feel was solid in regards to that particular element in terms of hinting it. And Dumbledore himself has a line that is a pretty relevant line, which is that a guy from the Ministry of Magic. Oh, quick question. Has there ever been any member of the Ministry of Magic higher than like ground level, like working stiff type, that hasn't been a complete and utter douchebag? Because I don't think there hasn't been. Or I don't think there has been, or I don't, whatever. Too many negatives. There's the review in a nutshell. But anyway, so he's got this thing where he's confronting this guy, and the guy says to Dumbledore, "You were like brothers," and Dumbledore says, "We were closer than brothers." And that is a decent line to hint to the connection that they had. Now, given that what is in here does appear to hint towards it, my strong suspicion is that this was added as a pickup. This was added in reshoots after J.K. Rowling and David Yates got chewed out for their assertion that the movie wasn't going to tackle that. Because what's in here is enough to claim that it is being addressed in some manner. And no, I don't think it was quote unquote preserving the surprise, because what's the surprise? We knew about this connection for a long time before, and the people that you told that you weren't going to do it were people who were expecting you to do it. So no, this wasn't like trying to preserve spoilers or anything like that. I think this was probably added in as a corrective. And, you know, setting aside my belief of how this ended up in the movie, what is in the movie is pretty good. It's fine as far as addressing that particular issue goes. But, you know, the stuff with... So, like I said, Lita and Credence's story, they were the ones that I wanted to see more of the most. Because, and again, there was a thematic similarity to them because they're both going through issues of trying to find connections. And having tenuous or questionable links to their own past. And so those two stories complement each other really well. Unfortunately, those stories have absolutely no bearing on what is going on with Newt and what is going on with Jacob and what is going on with Queenie and what is going on with Tina and what is going on with Dumbledore or honestly Grindelwald even, really. So, you know, all this stuff, it just piles up. It's just too freaking much. And you know what? In addition to the whole Credence thing, there's another element that from the end of the previous movie just gets tossed aside, which is Jacob shows up early in the movie and he's just like, and Newt goes, "Oh, I thought your memory got wiped." He's like, "No, it didn't take." I'm like, really? That's how we're, like, I'm not saying you cannot do that, and I like having Jacob back. He was one of my favorite characters in the last movie, and he's still good here. But, like, that's your explanation? Oh, no, it wasn't that. It didn't work. Yeah. Things like that, and how Credence gets really rushed to, even being alive, and then to where he is at the start of this movie. The whole thing right now, between this and the previous Fantastic Beasts, it feels like it's being made up as it goes along. Now, I don't know how thoroughly J.K. Rowling worked out the entirety of the Harry Potter series when she started writing it and in the early parts. But regardless of how much she did or didn't plan in advance, the Harry Potter series felt like something that had been planned in advance. It felt like things that were being laid out because they were going to matter later. It felt like things that were closed off because that story was complete and we're going to focus on other stuff now. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like sequels cobbled together on doing one at a time basis and not really having a firm plan, because you don't open a movie by immediately going, oh, remember these two major things that happened in the action climax and then the emotional climax of the film? Yeah, forget them. We're just totally negating them. That's crap storytelling in terms of a flow from entry in a series to entry in a series, especially if you're claiming to do a continuing story across multiple entries. That's just bad. And again, regardless of how much planning is or isn't going on ahead of time, it certainly feels like there is not a lot. And that's the thing. This movie, it's not bad, but it is frustrating. I see glimpses of the things that I know that I love about this series. I see elements and stories and characters that could have been in good stories if they were properly focused. I think, honestly, at this point, in many ways, I feel like J.K. Rowling's decision in the main Harry Potter franchise to limit the perspective to Harry. I mean, it's not in first person, but I mentioned this before, that basically, with the exception of the occasional flashback, but even those are done through the pensieve, so we're still getting Harry's perspective on that flashback. Or, the prologue scenes at the end, at the beginning of each book. It's always limited to what Harry is seeing, what Harry's experiencing, what Harry is thinking. And anything else that he finds out has to be told to him by other characters. So I think that in many ways was kind of a benefit to J.K. Rowling because it forced her to be focused. Whereas here, because the narrative is freed up and not restricted to the perspective of a single primary character, we have all these stories sprawling out and tumbling over, tripping over each other. And I think the lack of restrictions has just brought out some tendencies that need to be reined in when it comes to Rowling's writing, because a lot of these things that I'm talking about probably have interesting backstories and are interesting ideas and could be good stories, but she can't focus. She can't focus into a single strong central narrative purpose. And, again, I just think she shouldn't be writing these scripts. She's not a script writer. She's a novelist. Because if you want to compare the movies to the books meander a heck of a lot. Because you can put a lot more in the books. You're not restricted in time in terms of how long you have to tell something in a book the way you are in a film. You can take little divergences for the sake of a chapter. I mean, that is why the majority of what is cut from the Harry Potter movies is all the classroom stuff. You only get a handful of them in the movies. You get a ton of them in the books because there's the space for them. But now she is writing in a medium that doesn't allow her to have these many things all spread out when it needs to be confined to this amount of time. I'm not saying she shouldn't be coming up with the story, because I do think there is stuff in this story. There are stories worth telling. I'm actually getting fairly engaged in these characters and the overall story, but the way it's being presented just does not work. Someone else has to be writing the scripts for these things. Oh, and I said I'd come back to it. So yeah, the Nagini. The snake is a woman. Why? Other people aside from me have already pointed out why this is like a weird problematic thing in and of itself, given the fact that, she's probably, she or casting or whoever made the decision is probably going for diversity points because they cast an Asian actress. And that's fine, but now we run into, subservient Asian stereotypes, so that doesn't help. But even setting that aside, even setting all that crap aside, why? Why is she there? Again, if you had focused on Credence's story and built that connection between the two of them, maybe I'd understand why she was there. But since you didn't, I don't know. She serves zero plot function. Absolutely none. And there isn't enough breathing room for her to have relevance as an emotional core. There's no reason for her to be in this. It's like somebody's compiling Pottermore entries and trying to make a movie out of those. And they're good ideas, and there could be good stories made out of what is going on here, but this isn't it. Not bad, but frustrating. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Whole bunch of stuff you can do because there's buttons and there's links, including one to my Patreon if you feel like supporting me that way. But if you don't worry about it. Other links you can check out. But if you don't want to do that either, don't sweat it, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I just run the meeting. So until next time, this council is adjourned.